10, 9, 8.
You're going to mess my counting up. You know we're live now. Hush. So, hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So I know we keep saying three nerdy veterans, and we promise that that Nick Garber is real. We might need a proof of life image from him. He is married, so it is possible his wife stabbed him and is just he's rotting under a floorboard somewhere. So we'll see if we can get proof of life. But in the meantime, we're not here to talk about him today. Today we get to talk to legendary indie comic book creator, Mr. Marvin Wynn. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself for our audience?
Sure. Name's Marvin Wynn. I am the writer, creator of the comic book The Edge, currently being published through Second Sight Publishing. It's a book that is available through Diamond Distribution from your local shops. I've been working on this book since about 1993. And it's kind of a lead off of like my love of books from the 90s, like X-Men and Wildcats. Stormwatch, books like that, X-Force. And when I first started writing it, it was too much encompassed into that world. So I took a long break from it. I took some marketing classes, some writing classes, and didn't really come back into the book until around 2008, 2009-ish, when I met the current artist on the book, Mark Louis. And I think that he helped me to refurbish the things that I was working on. So currently we have released issue 1 back in March. Issue 2 is coming up next week. We are 16 issues ahead right now. So after issue 4, we're going to go monthly, which is something that's a big deal for indie comics. Indie comics usually don't do monthly books. It's usually 4 books a year, 3 books a year, maybe even 1 book a year. But we're going to test the waters and go monthly. And I believe we're going to do
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. That's because
a huge deal.
Right. So right now I'm only like I'm contacting every store that sells comics.
Okay.
To let them know that the book's available. So now instead of having to do that every couple of months, now I have to do it every month now. I got to bug everybody every month. So I'm emailing stores. So this past time I contacted 1,200 stores. And I think around the world there are 4,000 to 5,000 stores. So I'm going to be contacting any English-speaking stores and some stores that don't speak English. So we're going to see how far that goes. Hopefully, we're going to get translated into other languages, so that'll help push us into like Japan, China, India, and places like that. So we'll see how things go. But I mean, we've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff that I can talk about.
I was about ready to ask how you thought. I was going to ask how you thought manga, it would work in the manga market of Japan because, okay, I don't read comics, but I do read manga. I read Sailor Moon manga, so I'm not very mature.
Oh, it's fine. Like, as long as you're reading something, it's all good. It's fine. So it's questionable and somewhat yes. I would say that the trade would probably work better because it'll be one continuous story. So what we're talking about is that we do arcs. So we have the first arc is 4 issues, the second arc is 5 issues, the next arc could be 6, and it could go up and down from there. So I think that when you're going into markets with manga, however you want to pronounce it, is that you want to give someone a complete and total story because that's what they're used to reading. They're not really used to episodic storytelling, and that's dead in those kind of books. They're big, thick books that has probably maybe the complete story, maybe multiple stories in it. So I think that once we have a trade available, we'll translate that trade into multiple languages and see how that works out.
That'll be awesome. Though, honestly, staying even in English, I've talked to several people who that's how they've learned either Japanese or in English is because it was high motivation because they're super interested in the story. So they were willing to do the extra work to figure out the translation themselves.
So I learned a little bit of Japanese back in the 90s playing import games on the Sega Saturn.
See, you would know.
Yeah. So everything in the game was in Japanese, and it was a wrestling game called Fire Pro.
Okay.
And you could create wrestlers. So you had to be able to read what was on the screen, so you can go through each screen to find out what the heck you were doing to get to where you wanted to go. And you just didn't hit a button that said delete all your content because you wouldn't even know what it said. So I was able to glean some reading Japanese off of playing that game.
I feel like from the emphasis you put in that delete all may have happened more than once.
Yes, it happened once. Just once.
So you're smart enough that it only happened once.
Yeah.
Got it.
Fair enough. All right. So the second part of the introduction, dear listener and viewer, is to tell how we first found them. So we actually first found him when he was on the BAMF podcast interview, and we wanted to introduce him to our audience. So full disclosure, we haven't perfected our show template for comic books because we're not as well versed in this. So if you, the listening audience, have anything you think we should add to a comic interview to talk to the various artists and writers in this field, be sure to mention it in the Facebook group. And as you know, with the climate on the interwebs being what they are and it being so unstable, if you think there are other platforms than Facebook that you want us to look into being on, also mention that in the Facebook group, and we can start preparing to stay nerdy with you. And without further ado, Doc, you get to ask him your most favoriteest question of them all.
Oh, I love these. So these would be hard for me to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Your religion question: Battlestar Galactica, Eureka, or Terra Nova?
I'm going to go off the beaten track and reject all your answers.
Oh,
I love Star Trek. I love
him. Can we keep him?
I am a serious Star Trek fan, and my favorite Star Trek is Deep Space Nine. I love
him. We're keeping Marvin. Just to let you know, because Deep Space Nine is my absolute favorite, even though I grew up on NGG.
Yes.
It is my absolute favorite. I love it. And
it's my favorite because of Cisco.
Because he's amazing.
When Cisco knocked Q on his ass, that cemented him as my favorite captain.
No, he is amazing.
Yeah.
All hail Cisco.
And I really like that it did episodic storytelling that Next Generation didn't do. Next Generation wasn't episodic. It was kind of more of a close a chapter at the end of every issue kind of thing. I mean, every episode kind of thing. When you did that, it forced you to travel over the same ground more than once. So a lot of the time, it was like that with Voyager too, where they ran out of story and then had to just keep doing this. And like it was continuously on Voyager, the holodeck going crazy, and them having to escape the holodeck. But on Deep Space Nine, it was always the arc through season.
Yeah, there was an arc every season, and then there was the overall arc of his journey as an emissary, which I found fascinating. I loved it. I cried when the show ended, and Dax was my favorite.
And then when you got to the Dominion War, then all bets were off.
Yeah. See, we're keeping him. He understands me.
I never bought into the utopian view of humanity and the future and the concept that everybody is just happy not working because who needs to work?
But here's the thing, though.
And greedy
one second. But Deep Space Nine, this will show you how big of a dork I am. Deep Space Nine actually starts talking about how not everything was quite as utopian on Earth, because he talks about how when he was at the academy, he spent all of his credits but being back down to his father's restaurant and like pretending he was there and going down for dinner. And so there's a little hint that that there is still, while it is not a financial, like gold-backed society like the Ferengi or we have now, there was still some sort of a credit for work thing going on even then on Earth. So, and yes, I am that big of a dork.
Well, if you remember during the Dominion War, they declared martial law on the whole planet.
They did, and it was huge.
Yes. So if a utopian society that is in control of a situation wouldn't have to do that.
Fair enough. I didn't watch Deep Space Nine. I also didn't.
In the mandatory blood tests, remember that?
Yeah. Because they were looking for the founders. Yeah.
I'm not particularly religious, I never quite understood the anti-religious stance that Roddenberry took with the original.
I don't.
So
Okay, but Roddenberry was from El Paso, which is very, very heavily Hispanic and very heavily Catholic. I don't think it was always necessarily anti, just so much as downplayed.
Yeah. Religion did play a part in a few episodes. There was an episode where,
particularly in Deep Space Nine, which Roddenberry did have the least to do with, other than Voyager, which came out way after.
It was on Generation a little bit. Like Tasha Yar was very religious, and like there were situations where she was dealing with Wesley where he didn't understand drug addicts. The one episode where those guys were on that drug that they couldn't kick, they didn't need it. They just thought they needed, like heroin. And she brought up religion and things like that in that episode. So it was there, but it wasn't on the surface like it almost was in Deep Space Nine with the Bajoran religion and things like that.
Yeah, it was not as up there. I always found I was fascinated with how the Bajoran religion and Star Trek ethos, the Starfleet ethos overlapped. So.
All right, so if we ever do a panel on Star Trek nerddom, you're definitely invited back, and you've established your street creds.
Yeah.
All right, Doc, we got more religion questions to see if he can pass.
I'm sure he will pass. So, this is your fantasy religion: Forgotten Realms, Lord of the Rings, or Conan.
I have always been a Conan fan. Going back,
another redoing it, right?
Going back to the novels, and actually, a friend of mine, we actually were playing that massive multi-role playing game, Conan, where you can have slaves, and it was kind of interesting because we were on two sides of the shore on playing this game, and I'm building a hut so I can survive the night. And he's like, hey, I can make a wheel of death. What's a wheel of death? And he starts building it. It's the wheel from Conan that Conan had to push in the movie.
And
he went out and found some people to come push it for him. I'm like, what the heck, man? So
that is epic.
Yeah, like you can like kidnap people and make them work for you. Well,
you know, they have that Titan Books is going to be redoing and opening up and expanding the Conan universe, right? Yeah, no, it's totally awesome.
I enjoy those stories because it embroils it into that sect of high magic, and then the barbarian, where he is a character that hates magic like a passion. Like, I don't want anything to do with it unless it can help me. So like in the movie, when he goes and gets his friend the wizard to help him out on his mission, like if he wasn't afraid there would be magic there, he wouldn't bring that guy with him. He's like, he doesn't trust magic. He's Conan. He doesn't need magic. He's got a sword. What does he need magic for?
I had an NCO who was like that. He didn't believe anything science related.
Yeah,
almost like JR.
Yeah. Magic is fine.
All right, let's keep the show moving instead of just beating me up repeatedly over your weirdness with science.
You know what? It's not my fault that our guest is amazing and agrees with me. So, at the Blasters and Blade podcast, obviously we do both science and fantasy. But which was your first love, science fiction or fantasy?
I would say science fiction. I mean, I grew up the tail end of the 70s, so Star Wars was big for me, and a lot of those things, Star Wars and G.I. Joe, are a lot of the things that push me forward. So if anyone has read the book and you see that first page, everyone says that's a G.I. It's a secret base up in the mountains. That's G.I. Joe. That's Cobra. Cobra's hiding in there somewhere. So those are the things that, like, so I went from that. I went to Robotech. You had Voltron. You had all these other, like, these amazing things that open up the world to me. And I always talk about how Robotech was that one thing that pushed things over the top for me, because it was the first time on a animated series in the middle of the afternoon where someone died.
It really was.
When Roy Fokker died, when he's playing the guitar, he's sitting on the couch and he falls over and he started bleeding out. I'm like, is he dead? Nah, he's not dead. He'll be fine. They'll patch him up. He'll be back. And he's like, no, there's a funeral. He's dead. and then they killed off Ben, then they killed off all the SDF1 crew. I'm like, holy crap, they're playing for keeps on this show. Like, and then the Transformers movie came out, Optimus Prime died, and that was the end of it. It's like, that's the end of my childhood. I was no longer a child after those events.
No, I completely understand and agree. And those are actually, I swear, he watches the same shows I watched. Because I love Robotech. They just solved the lawsuit, actually.
Yeah. I'm just looking forward to them actually doing something with that property. They've been sitting on for 30 years doing nothing. So I saw there's new action figures coming out. They're releasing more.
I can't wait to build the action figures. I hope they have them, like, how they have the Gundam that you can build. I hope they have those. Yeah, so they've got like forage scales coming from Toonami. They've got all this new stuff coming out. And I'm just waiting for them to say, we're going to do a massive online game for Robotech. Well, and they've started saying that they're going to have some of the serious stuff coming out by the end of the year. Yeah, all the stuff that we never got to see. It was locked up in Japan somewhere when we couldn't get to it. So it's such a great time to be an adult and have a paycheck to buy it with it. Yeah, I can go out and buy anything I want. Like, I don't have to ask mom and say, Mom, can I get this? Because back then, the holy grail for a G.I. Joe collector was the USS Flag.
Oh, I wanted that so bad.
And I go and I look it up, and it was $125 when it first came out. I'm like, that's not a lot of money now. I could have just bought that anytime I wanted it right now. Now it's like, if you want to get it new in box, it's like $10,000. And I'm like, Mom, why didn't you buy this for me when I wanted it back then? That's what it still had it now. Of course you would. I would have loved it, just like it needed to be. So, what would you say is your first memory in speculative fiction? Oh, it's a G.I. Joe. I mean, it was the first comic I ever bought. My grandmother bought it it was at our 5 and Dime. Well, it used to be 5 and Dime. It was called McCrory's, and then they had a sister store in downtown Pittsburgh called Woolworth. They were on the same block. They pretty much sold all the same stuff, but in Pittsburgh, we were always about having things on corners. So there was a Candy Rama on one corner and then a Candy Rama on the other corner on the same block. So in between that, you had these two stores. And she bought me the first, because I watched the G.I. Joe cartoon, and G.I. Joe was the only comic book that had commercials. So at either the middle or end of episode, it would say, continue the adventures. And they would show like video and animation of them doing stuff. And then the comic would spin out. You're like, oh, I got to get that. I got to get this comic. And so that was my first comic I ever got, G.I. Joe #1. And that just springboarded me into other comics, because then you had Spider-Man and Amazing Friends animated. So I got into Spider-Man, and then Firestar was a favorite. Yeah. Still is. Yeah. But it was always funny with Firestar when they said that on the show that she was an X-Men. And you would get the books, and you're like, there's no Firestar in X-Men. What are they talking about? Are they lying right now? So Firestar didn't join X-Men until like 10 years ago. So it's like, this show's like telling you this thing, and then you're looking for her in a book, and she's never in it. And like, oh, that's not cool. See, I had access to the cartoons, but I was in the Middle East, so I didn't have access to the comics. Yeah. So I just always believed the cartoon. Right. So, and the funny thing about it is that it was originally supposed to be the Human Torch, and they couldn't get access to Human Torch to use them in the show. So they created a new character, Firestar, who looked just like Mary Jane. Yes. So is it Mary Jane? Is it Firestar? Is it was it Angelica Jones? Is it Jessica Jones? There's just so many different variations on these same characters that they throw out at you. So I mean, so you transition from that into Spider-Man comics. You get in then Captain America, and then you get into X-Men, and it's a whole different world with the X-Men comics, because it's telling you that these guys have powers, but everyone hates them. Why do they hate them? I really, growing up with disabilities that were unseen. Yes. I really identified a lot with the X-Men, and really thought the X-Men were fabulous, because they had things that people didn't like about them. Like, because I have the ADHD and the dyslexia and stuff. So the impulsivity that I have. Yes. And then, but then they also had a superpower to go with it. And I just thought that was really an amazing thing for a kid to see. And it was always that the outlaw thing that really drove a lot of people to those books back then, is that they're doing their own, they're heroes, they're doing their own thing, and the other heroes are like, oh man, I don't know if we can trust these guys. And it was something that came to a head recently in the comic when Cyclops and Captain America had a conversation, and Captain America tells him, you know, I'm here for you. And Cyclops goes, well, where were you during this? You're only here when we don't need you. When we do need you, you guys disappear from view from us. And it just shows, he's like throwing shade at Captain America. I'm like, go ahead, Cyclops, man, throw shade at Captain America. Like, you know, because you had that vision of Captain America always being there no matter what, but he's never been there for the mutants.
Well, because you have to be there, and it's hard when it's something you don't understand to be there for.
Yes.
And there's a certain level of being able to think about it from a different perspective.
Right. So. Right. Which you would think that Captain America would do, right?
You would, but at the same time, he's also always been in the dominant situation. Yeah. Like, yes, he was like the runt of the litter, so to speak, growing up, but he still was, you know, he wasn't Catholic during a time when it was bad to be Catholic, you know, and stuff like that. So in some ways, while he got it, he also didn't.
Right, exactly. And that's what I liked about the way that they separated those two different worlds into being their own thing.
See, I only learned like 5-6 years ago that they were all in the same universe.
Yes. And I'm hoping that when they finally get these characters into the MCU, that they're able to have that kind of that difference between each side, where it's not going to be we're all going to team up and fight this bad guy. It's going to be, why are you guys here? Get the hell out of here. We
got this. We know what we're doing. Have a nice day. Go back home and bake your cookies.
Yes.
Wait, there's cookies?
There's
always cookies.
All right. So we've talked about your first memory of speculative fiction was G.I. Joe, but what is it about the genre that you love so much?
It's just the action points and the drama. And like I was saying, is that with those shows from back then, you had all the action, you had all the goofiness, but you also had those drama points, and it was the voice acting that really drives home the point. Like Cobra Commander is one of the greatest animated characters of all time, because he had so much nuance about him, and it was always the voice actor Chris Latta that brought that to him, and also with Starscream, where he's this snaky guy and it's always either in the front or the background scheming on something. Even though he's winning, he's always going to find a way to screw it up because he wants more than he should have.
Starscream was always that person I felt bad for liking.
Well, I mean, he always got shot in the back by Megatron when he was scheming on him.
He always deserved it because he did shit that deserved it, but I still liked him. I go, no, stop it.
Yeah, he was like, and that's why I loved his character so much in the movie, when he just tosses Megatron aside like he's trash. He's holding him at the shuttle door, and Megatron lifts up his head and says, I still function. And Starscream says, you want to bet, and just tosses him to the side like he's a bag of trash. And it's just so great. But he gets what's coming to him like 20 minutes later. It was like, okay. It's like, that Megatron is that G goes, this is a hint, and he kills him, and it's over with. I'm like, oh God, Starscream is gone.
You know what? As a parent, I think our children are Starscream. You look at them and you should know you're going to get in trouble for this, but you do it anyways.
So how did your love of the genre transition into you writing, I guess, I'm not sure how, writing novels or comics in this space?
Right. So
stories.
Stories.
So I'll answer the first question, and then I'll go into scripting. So back in the 90s, when you had Marvel, you had DC, they're the big kids on the block. When you go to the spinner rack in the grocery store, that's all the books you're normally seeing. So I didn't discover other companies and books things until I hit a comic book store, and that was in the 90s. So I didn't know about Kamiko or Dark Horse or Avatar or these other publishers that were doing things. So my first introduction was when Image came along. So you had these guys from Marvel and DC that took their own destinies into their own hands, saying that we're kind of bigger than this company. And they were at that time. They were superstars. And you don't have those kind of superstars now because the publishers don't want to allow it to happen like that again, where these guys aren't selling, the books aren't selling because of the character, it's selling because of who's creating it. So if you got Jim Lee on the book is going to sell. What did X-Men #1 sold, what, 6 to 7 million copies? They've never hit that number again. And they took their superstar status and created their own company. And at that time, I was like, oh, so you can do this outside of Marvel and DC? I didn't know that. So it was then that gave me that flourish or that energy to say, okay, I want to create my own universe and see how it goes. And I was saying is that it wasn't very good. The first try wasn't very good. It was too embroiled in other things. And it was a lot of world building without story, which is probably the biggest sin ever.
You are so much nicer because we've had some go, oh no, you're not saying that, I burned it. You're not seeing the first thing I wrote.
Well, I mean, it's still there, and
we're seeing like the refined, better version of it.
Well, no, what I'm actually going to do is I am actually going to do I'm doing this thing that's called From Script to Store. Okay. Where I'm going to go through the whole entire process of creating a book from beginning to end. And all the trials and tribulations and the sweat and the tears that come from it as you hit roadblocks continuously in the story. Because there's never anything that's a straight line. And I think that people need to see that to understand this process, because it's a lot of times people think that it's just like a wave of magic wand and a book appears and then it's in stores.
I've seen that with fans.
Yes.
Quite often. It's like, excuse me, bam. No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Like, so when's the next issue coming? I'm like, it takes time. It doesn't magic it up and it just appears. So I want to.
She only puts she writes 3 books and then she starts publishes a series.
Right. So a lot of people don't do that though, and that's a lot of where people give up, where they publish the first book. They don't know how to market it, and the marketing part is probably the hardest thing, because I'm continuously switching a hat. So I'm a writer, I'm a publisher, I'm an agent, I'm an editor, I'm proving scripts, I'm contacting stores.
You're the all man. You have it all, and you do it all.
I'm that utility knife that just has to do everything with this book, because I want it to succeed. And then if people don't know it exists and I'm not telling them about it, they're not going to know. Like that, the Diamond is like, his catalog is a phone book. And like a lot of the stores, when I come, it's like, oh, man, this looks really good. I would have missed it if you wouldn't have emailed me or contacted me about this. I would have flipped right past it, because I don't notice things, because I'm not looking for anything specific. I'm just going, is it a #1? Is it a #1? Is it a #1? Is what they're doing. And like that's where a lot of the speculation comes in. We have to get #1s in the store, or people saying I have to buy the #1 because that's the kickers, or that's the one to become valuable later, or things like that. That's your speculation on those kind of books. So a lot of the drop off on the second issue is where you get hurt. And that's what I prevented with issue 2, and hopefully I can prevent with all the other books is that big drop off after issue 1. So to go into the scripting, so the way that I script, there's different ways to do it. So I'm doing panel setup. So I'm saying this is what's in panel 1. This is what's in panel 2.
Oh yeah, you're explaining. I was going to ask you what scripting is.
Oh, okay.
So because some people don't know, like me.
Yeah. Okay, so what is when you're doing comic scripting, it's very similar to a movie script. So you're setting the scene, you're saying what's in the scene, and then you're describing how you either want the panel to look, or how you want, or like if you want to have something. So like in this scene, we have 3 characters, and there's a table in the background that has something on it. If we're wanting to emphasize something like that. So generally what I'm doing is I'm giving every detail of that panel, what's in that panel. So it's like I'm pointing the camera at a scene and saying, this is everything that's in that scene. And then I'm doing either text boxes, which saying that there's a box that says, this is where we're at, this is what's going on, or we're doing dialogue. So we're saying that, okay, so this is what this character is saying, this is what this character is saying. And then when I give the script to Mark, he makes changes as necessary. I mean, he has that freedom of doing what he needs to make it work for him. So we don't want to have static panels. So sometimes the panel is on its side. Sometimes it's a smaller panel. So let's like this. So sometimes it's just a splash page. A splash page is like a cover. So it's just one page with just one large image and not having the panel breaks. So then once he gets the script, he goes into the drawing stage. He then turns in the pages to me, and then I refine the dialogue as needed. So because you have to make room on the panel for that dialogue. You don't want to cover up certain things. So then I have to work with the letterer to say, okay, so this is not going to fit. So I need to either rewrite the page in the dialogue, or we have to figure out a way to make this fit. So sometimes you have the word balloons break the panel, or sometimes something's breaking the panel to give you more room to work with.
Okay.
So with pacing of a novel, like there's formulas people use, there's various styles for novel writing. Do panel size affect pacing, or like how do you determine what panel sizes you use?
Yeah, right. So it does. So I mean, it's just a matter of what you're trying to convey on that page, and you want when you get to a odd page, you want someone to turn that page to the next even page. So I'm sorry, other way around. So when you get to the even page, you want to make sure they're turning the panel to the next odd page. So so you've got it's a piece of paper which is folded 4 ways. So you've got page 1, page 2, and then you're flipping over for page 3. So you have to end the page with something that's going to make them flip to the next page. So it's a lot of kind of making sure that there's something happening in that last panel that says, oh, I got to go to the next page. But what I like to do a lot at the end of the book is lead them to the next book also. So I'm doing so consider it like your stinger at an MCU movie where it's that end credit scene that says, oh, now it's time for the next adventure, and it's leading up to something like that. So I'm trying to do that at the end of every book to say, turn that page. And then when you close out an arc, you're doing the same thing. You're saying that, okay, this part is done. That next page has to jump to the next arc.
So like an epilogue almost in some novels.
Correct.
So many authors let their own real life experiences influence the stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments for you that shaped you as a storyteller?
I would say that, I mean, a lot of the stuff in The Edge is life. And it's a life of the things that are around me, because I know we'll talk about it later, but what the book is all about. But it's a lot of me people watching sometimes, where I take a bus and I just listen to the things that people are talking about, or I'm watching the news and seeing what things are going on in the world. And it's a lot of how I personally or emotionally or mentally react to those things that are coming out into this book, where I'm not preachy with it. It's a lot of subtleties and a lot of things that people sometimes do and sometimes don't notice when a character says something or does something, and it sometimes isn't that immediate consequence to their action. It comes later on where you're like, this person did this, and those consequences come three issues later, and the person's like, oh, I see what you were going with there.
I think.
Do you ever get letters from readers? Because I know this was released and then you pulled it and you're upgrading it and re-releasing it. So when it was first out, did you ever get like comments from fans like, oh, I see what you did 3 episodes or books ago? Yes.
So I get a lot of like Instagram messages. I get messages on Facebook, on Twitter from people who are saying that, man, this, like, there's a guy, well, from Walt. And the first time I talked to him is like he was saying that the book really resonated with him when we were talking way back when he first read the book, and he said that he really enjoyed what I was doing with the characters and how it kind of affected him in certain ways. So yeah, we had a lot of that where people are just really excited and saying that, man, I can't wait for that next issue to see what you're going to do next to this guy.
I think sometimes fans resonate with things that the creators don't always think that they're resonating with. Maybe like a small thing too. And those are always interesting to see. Right. But Speaking of fans, have you had any cool fan art or cosplay of a character yet?
Cosplay has not happened yet. Maybe in the future that someone will decide that they want to cosplay as a character. But we've gotten fan art. A lot of the stuff was from our older releases, but we've gotten newer stuff. But a lot of the stuff that we're getting is from more of the professional artists. So we have to figure out a way how to fit it into the book and how to get in there. We on my previous website, I did have a fan art section, but I'm like still rebuilding the website, and it's something I can only devote like 10 minutes a week to try to get it done. So hopefully one day I'll have the whole entire page of it, then the fan art will reappear back on the site.
Awesome. We look forward to that. So has anyone asked you for your autograph in public away from a convention or a book signing?
Yeah. So I actually ran into a person. We were actually coming from another comic store, and I ran into a person that was like, "Hey, I saw you at another con, or I saw you on YouTube," and they actually went to the store to buy the book so I could sign it.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
So then
That's
my
awesome.
next question is, do you have any weird or funny interactions with a fan since you started writing that you care to share with us?
So we just had 2 cons back to back in May.
Which cons?
Steel City Con and Three Rivers Con.
Okay.
Three Rivers Con is hosted by New Dimension Comics. They are the largest comic retail chain in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So they do a con called Three Rivers. This year they did it outside, and it was a good time.
Great.
It only rained for a few hours on Saturday, so we were there Saturday and Sunday, and it was a good time. So at that convention, there was a fan who came up to the table that we've been missing each other at conventions for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
So he would always come after I had just left, or I was away from the table and he went off, and then I didn't get to see him. So he was really excited to finally meet me in person. And it's one of those things that when someone loves your product so much that it just invigorates you to want to do more and do better.
That's awesome.
Then at Steel City Con, another fan that we've been missing each other at cons again for 5 or 6 years, finally got to meet him, and it was almost a very similar interaction with, man, I just love the book. I can't wait to see more. I'm really glad you're putting this out, and it's just so good to finally meet you in person.
So if anyone's listening, because we're starting to build, some of our audience are actually comic book aficionados, and they're like, man, I really love The Edge too. We're going to ask you again at the end, but what's the one place people can reach you where they can message you? Your email? Is it your Instagram?
I mean, any way you can contact me is fine. Like Instagram, I'm active on Instagram, active on Facebook, active on Twitter. I mean, if you want to send me an email, that's fine. But to get that quick interaction, because I'm very good at replying to messages on all those platforms, and I'm really interested in interacting with anyone who wants to interact with me.
Perfect. All right, Doc, you good? You look like you're going to ask something.
I'm just happy.
Okay. So this is where we talk about everything that Marvin Wynn has created. So can you give us the Reader's Digest version of your body of work?
Sure. So my main project right now is The Edge. Mark and I are working on a few side projects, something that is connected to The Edge and something that's outside of The Edge. So those ones are on the back burner right now. And I talk about them, but I don't want to give a lot of information on them because I want some things to be surprises. But so we'll just go with on The Edge for right now. So basically The Edge is a drug that is able to grant special abilities. But the price you pay is that the more you use the abilities, the more it kind of uses up your own energy. So some of the characters will get infected and some of them will just die right out.
Oh my.
Wow, that's deep.
Yes. So we're putting a expiration date on all the characters.
All right. So
Dog
didn't like that. So
Elvis had something to say.
Obviously, that means we're here to talk about The Edge. So where did the premise for this universe come from? How'd you come up with the basic idea? Was it psychedelics, a Ouija board, breathing in too many comic book glue fumes?
Well, like I was saying before, is that it's the way that I view our world, and we've gone through and have not been able to solve the drug epidemic in this country. That and we haven't solved it. It's just transitioned into something else. So we've gone from illicit, illegal drugs to drugs from pharmacies, and it's funny that within this world, we're going to have a kind of illicit version of the edge, and then a pharmacy version of the edge that's going to come along later. And they both have the same side effects. One is just more potent than the other.
Okay, that's deep. I kind of like it.
Better limit your modern pharmacology.
Absolutely. And whichever one is the worst for you, that's the one the Veterans Administration is going to give you. So
guaranteed.
Before we dig in, let's just take a minute and check out your art style. So we know that every comic book universe has sort of its own style. So we snagged this one. We originally were going to show some from your Instagram, which you should check out. It'll be linked in the show notes. But you gave us this glorious piece of art, so I have to share it. So what can you tell us about this art style that you chose for your comic? What makes it pop in the crowded field of indie comics?
So, the artwork is by Mark Louis, and I will not pronounce his last name because I'll butcher it, but I'll try. It's Vukinki Gat. So he's from the Philippines, and the colors are done by Luis Antonio Delgado. He's currently working. He works with IDW. He does Ghostbusters and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So he's currently the primary colorist on the book. So, and then our letters are James Reed, and of course we're being published by Second Sight Publishing. That's the company owned. CEO is Bradley Golden, and the COO is Marcus Roberts. So this is basically the main team in the book. We don't give them like a fancy X-Men type name. We just call them the Strike Team. So each one of them is edge active as far as we know. And we're going from left to right here at the top. You've got Blaine. His abilities are he can create energy barriers around him, but he cannot control moisture and heat. So the longer he stays in there, the more oxygen he burns out. So it's not something he's not like Invisible Woman where she can like stay in that portal forever. He's eventually going to burn out the oxygen in there. So he can't stay in there for long.
Okay.
In the middle, we have Interim. Her abilities are she can create time portals that allow her to see 5 to 10 seconds into the future, which allows her to get the jump on anyone she's fighting. Those portals can also be used to step through, so she's the team's transportation. So if they can't get to somewhere by using conventional, which they have their own plane, she can create portals for them to step through. The problem with those portals is that they are not all closed. So she's been opening them since she was young, and she can no longer close them. So it starts to affect the time stream. So where she's from is 12 hours ahead of everywhere else on the planet.
Wow. Okay. That could be for some interesting. This almost begs for some full-length novels set in this world.
So I mean that could come. But we also like to say that the portal is a door, so it's open on possibly another side. So while she can use it to go places, possibly someone else can come in from somewhere else.
Okay.
So the open portals could be very dangerous in the future.
Okay.
Next to Interim, we have Mystic. Mystic is the team lead. He has the ability to generate energy blasts through his swords, and also to hold the energy in the swords to make them stronger. We have not yet said if the energy is coming from him or from the swords, and these swords also have their own history. So later in the issues, we're going to dive into the background of the swords. So issue number 6, we tease it a little bit, but then we're not really going to talk about it until later in the issue. So the one thing that we do with this book is that we don't do origin stories until it's important to the story itself. So issue number 2 starts off with a little bit background on the middle character, the bottom Bolt, where we show a little bit of his background, but it leads right into what's going on in the current story. So in the next level, on the left, we have Shift. Shift is able to demolecularize anything he touches. So if he could touch a mountain and turn it into a liquid within a few hours. He's kind of the de facto hero of the team. He's the one that wants to be the big brother to everyone and wants to take care of the whole entire team. But he has a lot of things in his background that is preventing that, and that's going to play into the story a lot later. Next to him is his kind of love interest, him. She has the ability to generate sound blasts from any sound that she can hear. So she continuously uses earpieces and carries a mini disc player with her of all time. So there's always some sound that she can generate.
Nice.
The character next to her is Randa. She is pretty much a human battery. So she can absorb all kinds of energies directed to her and pull it from the air. As you see, she's wearing a visor. So when her powers were originally activated, she had her hand in her face and her powers turned on and she almost blinded herself. So she wears the visor currently, so she doesn't have to wear, she have to wear glasses while she's pretty much doing her thing. And our last character is Spinoff. Spinoff is able to mimic and copy anyone else's powers. So he can contain as many powers as he needs for any situation. That can also be a help and a hindrance for him in issue 1.
So how much of a hassle is it to try to, like, for it's easy to say, oh, this person has this power and this person has this power.
Yes.
But then you have to start thinking about the logical, like, if this, then that approach.
Yes.
And your power bases for all of them are so varied.
Yes.
Does it ever, like, make you have to stop and think, like, how would I use them?
Right. So, I mean, that was one of the things that we tried to figure out up front when we were creating the characters. And that, as I was saying before, is that with these powers, they can't control them. That's not I don't consider it to be like a muscle memory, something you can learn. I mean, you can train and practice as much as you want, but we have situations where the characters are in a fight and their powers turn off, or they completely lose control of their powers and something happens they don't want to happen, or and instead of the Bolt character where we want to do something to him later on that's going to make him force himself to go further along in his power base to make himself more powerful, because he starts to love that power and wants more of it because he knows that it keeps him safe. So it's the team dynamic around him that's saying that you don't need to worry about that because we're here with you. But he's young, so his brain is in the wrong place and he wants to be more powerful so he can be in control.
Okay.
So there's a gift and a curse, and it's baked into their personalities with how their powers work, and then how their powers won't work later.
All right, next question is you, Doc.
I know it is. I'm just appreciating his answer. So moving on to the universe itself, what would be your 30-second elevator pitch for this?
So, I mean, after we go through like what the Edge does in this, and I mean, it's just a book about the character is called Revenant. He is pretty much a de facto lead character. We don't consider him a villain or a hero. We want the reader to decide on what side he's on, even if he's not on anyone's side but his own. So it's just Revenant knows the secrets of the Edge either by his mouth or from his own blood. So if someone wants to capture him and they were to do an autopsy or drain his blood, they want to find out about this Edge that the regular populace is not aware of at that current date. So his former handler, once he goes rogue, Tartable, forms a team to go after him. And it's a lot more of, we don't know who's on whose side. We don't know who the good guy is. We don't know who the bad guy is. And we're just going forward with that notion of, we want the reader to say, is he a bad guy or a good guy? He seems like he's trying to do his own thing and they're trying to corral him, and what's going on. And we just want to have those thoughts in the back of people's heads of what you're thinking is happening is probably not what's happening.
That's fair. I think that's very often some of the best stories out there. So what is it that makes your series special in the way of comics?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's the whole entire encompassing thing with the drug itself and how it's a finite thing, and how we're saying that a lot of comics, you have these characters that have gained control of these abilities. I don't think you can control shooting lasers from your eyes. I just doesn't seem like something you can control, or something that would be pleasant for you if it was happening. I mean, you would think like it would burn your corneas out or something every time you was trying to use your powers. And do they heal? Probably not. And it's those things where those characters in other books are in control, and it's more or less about how more powerful they can become, and how they're just wrecking up cities and things like that as they go along with these abilities, and how it's just throwing all these different characters at them. We don't want to do that. We want things to seem like they're escalating as you go along with the story. So we go from 1 villain to 3 villains to 4 to 5 to 8 to maybe a possible entire universe wanting a piece. And when we do that kind of stuff, it's kind of that slow burn with the story as we're telling you more and more about these characters, and you're trying to figure out whose side they're on and who you should really be rooting for.
Okay, so that gives you the question is, you talk about all the damage this powers cause.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody ever written a book about like the, I don't know, insurance agent in a superhero world? Because can you imagine the claims they're constantly paying out? I mean, like, they're destroying cities left and right.
Yeah. So if you saw, was it Spider-Man Homecoming?
Mm-hmm.
There was Damage Control. And that's an old Marvel comic, Damage Control. They're the guys that come in and clean up the messes that the superheroes make.
Okay.
Yeah, so they get paid. Thought about it. Yeah, so they get paid by the city or Tony Stark or whomever to come in and fix the building, clean up the streets, and take away all the equipment that gets left behind.
Okay. I'm sorry, that was just a random thought.
Yeah.
So that's called the novel creator in his head, trying to figure out how it works.
Yeah.
So what tropes do you feel the Edge hits on the best, whether they be science fiction, fantasy, or superhero, or whichever story tropes you think actually fit?
I think that on the surface, it's a superhero trope, but in the meat and potatoes of the book is sci-fi. We're diving a lot into how your RNA and your DNA works when dealing with these kind of things, because you have to think that the Edge is a foreign element in the body, and it's accepted for some people, and some people it will not be. So we actually go through that, where we're dealing with a group of characters where the Edge is kind of being rejected by their bodies, and the results of that. So as a quick spoiler, are you familiar with the character Kitty Pryde from the X-Men?
Yes.
So, her ability is to walk through solid objects.
Yeah.
So we have a character who has that ability, but as she's walking through, her leg gets stuck as her powers turn off.
Ouch.
So, yeah. So we have to amputate. They have to amputate the leg because they can't get it out of the wall. It's a metal wall, so they can't get it out. So there are things like that. It's like it's the blessing and the curse of that ability, and then how is it going to transition from there as they get infected? Are they going to explode? Are they going to just burn out? Are they going to turn to a husk? So it's a lot of that, the sci-fi part of that we lean on a lot, but we do the superhero stuff too. We've got a character called Sigma that has been fighting. He's our Superman archetype character, where he's been fighting the good fight for 20 years. And he develops PTSD because of it. So he can no longer fight the battles anymore, because it shakes him up so much that he can't even walk out his door and be a hero ever again.
That's a heavy concept to deal with, and more power to you for doing it. Because I do look at some of those like the X-Men, and I'm like, why aren't they more fucked up?
Yeah.
Then
right. So we're going to dive in on that, and we're going to take that Superman archetype and turn it on its side and say that there's only so much things you can punch before you get tired of it, and how your brain affects you, because the most powerful man in the universe could accidentally punch someone and kill them.
Yes.
So how does that person deal with that if that happens on accident? They're just not going to say, "Oh, that was an accident, move on." No, it's something that's going to be in the back of their brain. So they're going to have to start pulling their punches, and then all of a sudden you can't fight anymore because of that.
So what subgenres do you feel that this story fits into, other than just superheroes? I know that's a subgenre, but
right. So just the other thing, sci-fi is where we're at. I mean, when we start dealing with a little bit of the magic later on, but in our world, like in most is magic is just science you don't understand.
Okay, that is fair. Very C.S. Lewis of you.
Yeah. So it's going to appear like it's magic, but it's just science.
Okay, and so now onto the story itself. What can you tell us about is there one main character for the main comic line?
Yes and no. So we generally follow the strike team through the whole entire series. They are the de facto leads. But I would say that the first 4 issues is called The Edge Revenant. Revenant is pretty much the main character of that arc, because we try to give him he has some mental issues where he's working through the things that are happening to him and the things that were done to him, and he just wants revenge. And eventually he gets clear to some of that, but then he still wants to get at the guy who did this stuff to him. He's like, he wants Tartable bad, and he doesn't care what anyone says to him to try to say, well, maybe you should focus on something else. He's like, nah, I want this guy. I want him dead. So after that, we go into a storyline called The Reign of Chaos, where we bring in a new team to face off against the strike team. And like I said, things just keep escalating from there, where there's going to be people from everywhere that's going to want a piece.
Okay. So you've told us a little bit about their powers, but what about their personalities? Because that's something some of the shows, like you mentioned, G.I. Joe, like some of those characters back in the day, they didn't really give them personalities.
Mm-hmm.
It was very flat storytelling, but it doesn't sound like that's what you did. So what kind of personalities did you give these characters?
Well, I think it's a mix of a lot of different thought patterns on a lot of the characters. Where you're looking at a character called Blaine. He's kind of the guy who's really sure of himself, but underneath the surface, he's not really sure of himself. Where he's stepping up the game, but in the back of his mind, he's like, man, this is some jacked up stuff that's going on right now. And then you've got Mystic, the team lead, who always wants to be the first guy through the door, whether it's good or bad. He's always wants to be on point to protect his team. Bolt is the youngest, and I was talking about him before, is that he's the one that's going to want a taste of that power, and he's going to want more and more of it, and it's going to start to affect not only him but the entire team as he goes down this path that it's not going to be good for him or anyone. You've got Randa, who is kind of like the shyer side, but she's the most powerful character so far in the universe. But as with that power is that she doesn't know what she's doing, so she's really timid about using her full abilities, because she doesn't know how it's going to affect her or anything else around it. I mean, she could probably blast a hole in something and that be the end of it. Spinoff is more of the let me see what I can do to help in any situation where I can use your power while I'm using this power, and I can affect everything at one time. And that is going to affect him later, because it's going to be a situation where his powers aren't going to be working the way he wants them to, and then it's going to be bad. Interim is more of the brawly one. She's the one that wants to get into the middle of the fight and doesn't care what anyone else wants to tell her about what she wants to do. Him and Shift are I want to call them our power couple, where, I mean, they're the ones that are probably going to get sick of it the most. The constant fighting, the constant battles, the constant, we're not solving any problems. So why do we keep doing this? So a lot going on with the characters in it. And as we add more characters to the story, they've all got different things going on and different personalities and different ways to handle each situation.
So if I'm hearing you right, if Marvel and DC are checkers, then your characters are chess in the way you're describing the world. Because this definitely seems a lot deeper.
Right. So I mean, but the funny part that you mentioned chess is that there's another book by Alfred Page that we've worked together forever, and we've been trying to cross over our books, and his book is called Chess.
Perfect. So were there any secondary characters that were memorable as you were writing this universe?
I would say that our secondary characters are Tartable and Tandra. So Tartable is kind of the guy who is formulating all the plans and sending them out on missions, and Tandra is his mission specialist. So she was the one that actually went out and recruited the team members. And then you've got Revenant, and I consider him to be one of the nuttiest people I've ever written. And the funny part about it is he has quickly become probably the most popular character in the book from some of the readers. Like, they love Revenant, and it's something of a good thing and a bad thing, because he's that guy that's on the fence. He's like that Harley Quinn or that Deathstroke character where you're not really sure what side they're on. And what it usually happens with those kind of characters, like, you add them more to the story and then they become boring. So I don't want that character to become boring. So we bring him in, we push him away, we bring him back, we push him away. We don't want him to have too much of the spotlight, because then we have to try to open up the character's head and show all the nuttiness that's in there. And then people will be like, well, I don't like this guy anymore. He's a clown. What's wrong with him?
So they're like the seasoning to the main dish.
Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned that you wanted to keep everybody guessing about who's the bad guy with regard to characters that have imbibed in the Edge. But are there any, like, just obvious these are the bad guy characters in your universe? Obviously, no spoilers.
Yes. Yeah. So we crossed that line in later issues where we have a honorable true heroes and unhonorable true villains, where it's like, we want to save the day no matter what, and then you have we're going to wreck up everything no matter what, and we're going to kill everyone in our path kind of stuff. Yeah, those characters come up.
Okay, so how do you think your characters would handle it if they met you? Oh, what?
You froze for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Okay. So my question is, if your characters found you in a back alley and you're like, oh, you're the reason this all happened, how do you think they'd respond?
If it was Revenant, he'd probably kick my ass.
Okay.
Revenant would probably kick my ass and dump me in a garbage can or something.
So he definitely take point. He feels very strongly about you. Okay.
That's the one character I would never want to meet in a dark alley, because he's nefarious.
So do you think you would kind of geek out and be happy and be like, this is so cool? Or do you think you just...
I mean, it'd be one of those situations where it's one of those things where, if you've ever watched like UFC, and some of those characters or some of those fighters, I won't say no characters because it's not wrestling, come on to the daytime shows, and the guy's like, kick my ass. Or have Ronda Rousey come on, kick my ass, Ronda Rousey, that kind of stuff. So like, oh, you kick my ass, it's the greatest day ever.
People are weird.
Yes. Well, that's what makes it fun, right?
Indeed.
So do you have a favorite character archetype?
I would say that, like, I dabble in so many of them, and like I said, that we've tried to avoid the main archetype. We tried to avoid the Captain America archetype, the Wolverine archetype, the Batman archetype. The only one we really focused on was Superman one, because I think Superman is one of the most interesting characters that gets the most grief, because it's so hard. It seems really hard to me to write a character that's so pure, and that you can't really. I don't like when they try to drag Superman down like they did in the Justice League movies, where they drug him down to us, where we should be trying to rise up to him, like the MCU did with the Captain America characters. Like, everyone wants to be like Cap, and you find a lot of that with the characters saying that there was the Punisher. Like, the Punisher is a character that loves Captain America and wants to be Captain America. And if it wasn't for his family getting killed, he would have been a Captain America type character, where he's doing the good work. And when you do that archetype of a character, you have to throw out that goodness of the Superman character, and then say that we're going to take him down a little bit. We don't want to drag him all the way down to being like a regular person, because then he's not a Superman anymore.
Interesting.
Okay. Sometimes I get it mixed up. I know this is going to be heretical, but when you were talking about Superman, I'm like, yeah, that's Captain America too. And then you were like, and in this other universe.
But if you look at some of the stuff, and I'm not by any means a comic aficionado, but Superman, particularly if you look at like the ones where he's landed in Germany or Russia, he embodies the best idyllic characteristics of whatever culture he lands in,
right,
and internalizes those in. So Captain America would always be Captain America by those standards of what he has,
right,
versus Superman is much more a matter of where he landed and being the epitome and the pillar of whatever that culture is that he landed in.
Right. And what I was saying is that
I learned a thing or two talking with my brothers about comics.
And they did something I didn't think was very good for the character in the Zack Snyder movies, where they took Superman and drug him down to being a human being. And he had neuroses and he didn't want to be a hero. And I'm like, it's Superman. He's Superman for a reason.
No. I'm much more, I think that it's truer to the character to say that he just, he embodies the epitome of whatever that culture is, whether it's he lands in Midwest Iowa or downtown Atlanta or occupied Berlin or Russia. But then I don't even want to contemplate him landing in China.
That's projecting though. And didn't Captain America have his analog with Captain Canada and some of the others?
Yeah. So there's a Captain. There's a what's it? Is it the Maple Leaf?
Yeah.
And then there's Captain Canuck.
See, I remember
Captain just a cosplayer.
Yeah.
No, that's a real thing. There's Captain. I think there's one real character.
Yeah.
See, I told you I don't know comics.
But
you got Union Jack. And I think that the more you expand upon those universes, that like every country should have their own Captain America type character, because you need someone to be like the embodiment of the dream of that nation. Somebody who's going to wave the flag no matter what, and he's going to be that symbol that everyone wants to strive to be like. And I want to be like Captain America.
I will say, particularly because I did watch Winter Soldier and Falcon. One of the things I liked about him, it was about Captain America, both in the Marvel universe as well as in those, was it wasn't just the embodiment of the ideals of the country, but the push to be those ideals, and not just rest with, okay, well, you're trying. No, you're trying, but let's push it to the next level.
Right. It was.
I like that they did those with the Captain America characters and both of them.
It's the we need to be better thing that.
It's why I didn't like the interim cap.
Yeah, to push the U.S. agent.
Yes, I kept calling him Interim Cap because he wasn't quite right, because he wasn't pushing us to be better.
No, I mean, he like even in the comics, John Walker was the guy. So when Captain America left the Shield in the comics, it was because they wanted him to do something he didn't believe in.
Yeah.
And the U.S. agent character, John Walker, was the guy who would follow orders no matter what, because he was a soldier. Yeah. And he was a modern soldier, not a soldier from World War I or World War II era that then saw what happened after those things happened. It's like, and he's like looking at the world like, we didn't get any better. What happened? Like, I was frozen for all these years. Why aren't things better than they were before?
Yeah.
So finally, what in the universe where stories are told, those universes are as much a character as the protagonist or antagonist.
Yes.
So other than the fact that this drug exists and it gives people powers, what can you tell us about the universe itself?
So, I mean, it's a modern world, and there's a lot of trying to get minds and screw everybody else characters in there. The universe itself is in flux. So I was saying is that with the portal thing is that you never know. You don't know what's coming next. And that's the one thing that we like to talk about with the book is it's all about escalation and how we deal with our escalating things going on, because it's the presence of that drug that is causing these other factors in the universe to take place. So it's like, oh, they've got all these powers. we need to go down there and mess with them and see if they're as powerful as they think they are.
Do you ever cover where that drug comes from?
Yes, and it's not a good thing. There's a lot of good things happening in the book until things calm down to a point where everyone decides on what's the right path, and everyone's, like I said, everyone's going to try to get a piece. So, like I said, that you're going to have the original Edge. You're going to have another version of it that someone's going to mass produce and get out into the world, and then things are just going to go haywire from there because multiple people are going to be using it then.
Okay. And since the world of art creation is a little bit mystifying to us normies, can you tell us a little bit about how you create your scripts? You gave us a brief like Reader's Digest version of it earlier, but so what's that look like?
So, I mean, it's a lot of paneling. So like I'm describing the scene. So we're saying that, so it's like page 1, panel 1, and then we're setting the scene. So it's opening scene, like one of the ones I'm working on now is an opening scene of the city of Pittsburgh. So we've got the point, we got the fountain and the point, and then we've got the skyline and the city. And then the next page, you're establishing what's happening on the ground. So you're saying that character A is doing this in that scene. He's pointing, he's talking, he's holding something in his hand, and then you go into your dialogue. So you're saying that this is what the person is saying, and then this is what if someone is reacting to that. So it's like I said, it's like a movie. Like you're looking at a still from a movie, and you're saying that we're placing things into that still and that scene to try to move the story along, and then you're transitioning from that one to the next panel, and it's always about movement. So you have to have some kind of movement that is moving someone's eye left or right as you move through each panel. You don't want to confuse people and have them go, where am I supposed to go next? So it has to be movement showing you, oh, you go left to right, and then you're going back over to the left and then back over to the right again as you're reading, going through everything.
So for your creative process, does it start with the art or does it start with the story?
It starts with the story. So I'm writing the story, I'm writing out the script, and then I'm passing it over to Mark to do the art. And then once he's done with the art, he passes it back to me, and then I go back through it and make sure I don't have to make any changes to any dialogue to make sure that we're not covering up anything on the panel.
Okay.
I'm just laughing because that's what I always say is I don't know which order to read what.
Yes.
When I read a comic and I'm like, it's not like a paragraph.
No. I mean, and that's on the artist to make sure that your eyes are being guided where you're supposed to go. If that's not happening, then the person isn't doing it right. So I just saw a book recently that had all the panels were the same size on every page. And I'm like, that's boring. I will never, ever buy a book or read a book that does that. You don't do that. You have to have variations. You have to have just like on one of our pages in issue 1, when Interim is in a fight, when she's hitting people, the panels are sliding to where she's punching them. So if she's hitting them to the left, the panel sliding to the left.
Oh, that's cool.
Down, it's sliding down to the right. It's sliding to the right. So that's what Mark brings to the table. And I didn't tell him to do that. He did that on his own. And that's why I say that in the time that we've been working together, since I think we started working together back in 2010, 2008, I've only had to make one change to something that he drew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And that was Blaine's hair. Originally, Blaine had long shoulder hair, and I hated it. So I had him change it, and then he went with the anime pointy hair, which is stuck for all this time.
Nice.
So that's kind of cool. So the Edge is obviously it's part of a larger universe. So what's next for the world you created? You mentioned you've got 16 book arc. Is that the end, and then you start another series in the universe, or will it keep going?
Well, our arcs are broken down by 4, 5, or 6 issues. So when I said we have 16 issues done of the book, which is why this is allowing us to go, like, normally indie books don't release monthly because you can't really keep the pace. But since we have so many books, we're going to start going monthly. until we reach issue 10. And then we're going to go back bi-monthly again. But it's just a lot of building. So this is the book we're working on right now is the fifth arc. We're already on the fifth arc of the book.
Wow.
That sounds interesting. So real quick before Doc asks her questions, is this something you have to buy a physical copy of, or can you get, like, I know Comixology is a thing, but I also have heard it's very hard to get into. So is this something where you can buy a digital copy somewhere for people that prefer to read that way?
Issue 1 is available on Comixology.
Okay.
But the book is in the Diamond catalog that goes to all the stores, so it is orderable from your local shop. We sold out issue 1, so I've got some con exclusives coming to me, and I've got a few copies left of issue 1. So if someone is looking, can't find issue 1, I do have copies available that I can sell and ship.
Wow.
But it's just print copies for this?
Oh yes, but issue 1 is on Comixology.
Will issues 2 forward be at some point?
Yes, they'll be listed on Comixology eventually. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So you may
All right,
just
Doc,
have
it's
to
you.
wait a little longer.
Yeah.
Hence why print media is still awesome.
Yes, I am a print guy. I mean, I back people's Kickstarters, and they're like, "Oh, here's your digital copy." And I'm like, "I don't care. Where's my physical?"
Oh.
I want it in my hand.
Yeah.
I like it in my hand.
But then you run out of storage space. We can't all do what your friend does and have like
that is true, but I stopped buying physical movies so that I have space for comics.
I tell you, this guy is amazing because I get him.
We can't have basements where I live. The water table is too tall. That would be an indoor pool if I tried.
Well, you know what? It's not my fault. I live in civilized society where we have basements and attics and children's bedrooms that we just fill with books.
You're a heathen, but we like you. So the next question.
So every universe has its own internally consistent rules of science and technology. So you've talked about the edge of the drug, but what other tech or magic can you give us without spilling any spoilers?
Sure. So in later issue 10, we are introduced to the government's kind of superhero squad. Well, we call them standard issue. They are using the alternate version of the Edge. So what they can do is they wear kind of like flight suits that have needles for injection into their spine.
Ouch.
So let's say that I want to be able to have fire powers. So they have a pad on their arm where they dial up a power. They get the injection and it gives them that ability. So we've later in the book, the powers have been cataloged. So now they can give whatever powers they want to anyone.
Oh, wow. Talk about on demand.
Yeah.
So.
Until it kills you, but
it's like details.
Only Revenant knows that. He's the only one who knows.
So hold on real quick. When they die, and if you haven't said that and you can't answer, I understand. Is it their power that consumes them? So like if they were a flame power, do they like combust? If they're like a lightning, like, I don't know. Is it their power that kills them ultimately, or is it just a death? Like they just die? It
could be, it works, it's variations. So it could happen that way. They could just husk out. Like they just husk. So all their energy from their body is just gone. They have no more, their body can no longer process or pump blood to their body anymore like that. So their heart could stop. Or their lungs could stop. They could stop breathing, things like. So it's going to be a lot of different variations depending on how the person used those abilities.
Nice.
So what tech or powers actually would you use for daily use?
I would think that the power that I really would want is more. I would want to fly.
Okay.
So I don't have to buy any more plane tickets to go to conventions.
Well, I was just going to ask how you would use that. So there you go. And I totally get that.
I would be able to go to any convention I wanted if I could fly.
I totally endorse this. I would be all about that. So do you have any fantastical creatures or aliens in your universe?
Yeah. So I've shared it, so I'll talk about it. So in later issues, we have what's called the M's, and you may know that from the Bible. M's were they're warrior class angels. So these are going to be very familiar to people who watch Deep Space Nine. We've based them off the Jem'Hadar.
Awesome.
So they're bred for war, and they're pretty much thrown at you in waves. And the ones that survive become more powerful. The more they fight, the more powerful they become. So then you go from like a grunt to what's called an elite, and an elite is a better fighter and more capable than 1,000 grunts.
I like that.
You're just going to be a grunt, JR. It's okay.
Someone's got to do it.
You gotta start somewhere, and it's one of those things where if they survive, then they just become more powerful. So the more you survive, the more powerful you become.
So, well, you already said what inspired you on them. So I guess the next question is JR's.
Well, okay, you're right. We'll do that. So
I know I'm right. I'm always right, except for when I'm wrong.
So would you consider superheroes a form of alien life because they have powers that make them so different, or would you consider them transhuman?
I like in the book we called them enhanced. So I think that like other companies use altered humans or things like that, but yeah, we use the term enhanced human in the story.
So could anybody become could anybody become an enhanced human, or does it have to be like a special?
There is something in the person's RNA that allows them to kind of encompass the edge. Other people, like I said, that it runs right through them and just kills them instantly.
So you could either come up with some really cool powers that'll kill you, or you could die instantly. But either way, it's going to kill you.
So, and I've shared this before. So we'll have a group of characters that and you know, since it's a superhero book, we have to have ninjas. So somebody actually asked this question to me like a year ago before we invented, like, do you have ninjas? And I go, we don't have ninjas. So we invented ninjas because we call them the fiends. And you can probably figure out why they're fiends.
Nice.
I'm super excited by this.
Yeah. So, and then if you've seen the pictures of them, their masks that they wear look very, very familiar and look just like the M's faces.
Okay. So as this interview is winding down, was there anything about the Edge that we didn't ask that you wanted to tell us before we move on?
I think you covered everything, but I mean, the one thing that we always like to talk about with the book is that we are a company, not just Second Sight, but the book itself, that wants everyone to enjoy this book. We want everyone to be fans of the book. I'm very, very, and not only me, but the rest of the team are very active on social media, and we do like to talk to people. We don't care what the topic is. If you want to come and talk to us, I mean, as long as if you're nice to us, we're nice to you. But I mean, we're just having fun, and we want to bring fun back to comics. And a lot of people are saying that some of the comics they're reading aren't fun, and I see those messages and I say, hey, have you tried out this book? Here's a preview of it. If you're interested, check it out. And I've turned a lot of people around to the book just based on them fleeing from other titles.
So go ahead, Doc.
I was going to say, I think after this year, particularly, a lot of people, you need to have that break.
Yeah.
And you need to have that escapism to just help find that balance. And I think those are the things that we ultimately come back to time after time.
Yes.
No matter what. I mean, I was talking to somebody, I'm like, oh, this is the most pivotal book I've read, but I've read it probably cover to cover only 4 times, as opposed to, which that sounds like a lot, but when you can compare it to like the Rowan, which I read cover to cover every year for 10 years, is nothing.
Right. I mean, it's comfort. It's comfort food.
So,
and we're always going to go back to things that make us feel comfortable about ourselves and our world. And
And if you can stretch us just a little bit within it in a way that makes us comfortable with thinking about it from a different perspective, it's even better.
Right. And like I said before, that we're telling a story that's topical. We're not throwing it in your face and telling you this is how I feel about this, because I don't want my thoughts on religion or politics, whatever, to encompass this book or these characters. They're all their own thing. It's not me talking through the characters.
Yeah. I had a friend who once put it as a good science paper, and this was a professor who became my friend, but he was my mentor for a while. Because a good science paper lays out all the facts and lets you come to your own conclusion.
Right. I'm not telling you how, like I said, I don't want to tell anybody how they should feel about Revenant, even though I think he's a jerk. If you like him, fine. He's a jerk to me.
So that's one of the things I will say is you get a lot of people that will complain about, insert video game, computer games, RPGs, whatever the medium. They will complain about the existing market, and they're talking always about the legacy producers of content. And it does feel like, to a point, a lot of these businesses have gotten stagnant because they're so worried about losing money that they just they want to trade on nostalgia, and they don't do new things, and they don't trot into those dark corners. And if that's what you like, and it sounds like that's what you're giving people with the edge, then you listener, then you need to support the indie people that are producing those comics, those movies, those games.
Right. And that's the one thing that we will always say, is that the corporations are building IPs. They're building things they can sell on lunchboxes and backpacks and toy stores and movies. We're telling stories to sell stories. We're selling you stories and characters, not a lunchbox. So, I mean, if you're feeling like that you're not getting what you need from the big publishers, come down to the indie books, come down to Second Sight, come down to Scout, come down to Source Point Press. These are publishers that are putting out massive amounts of good material, and we just want to be noticed. I mean, if we can get our numbers up to as high as Marvel or DC, maybe they'll change what they do, but we still want to say that if you are looking for good stuff, and this stuff that just started, like there's no 60 years worth of backlog you have to go through to try to find out who Spider-Man fought in issue 1 of Spider-Man back in 1960, because now this character is back to life again, even though Spider-Man or whoever killed him a long time ago, but now he's back, he's brand new. Is that we're building as we go, and we're keeping you entertained along the way.
Outstanding. I couldn't agree more. But as an indie novelist, I am a little bit biased. Not that I have anything against Trad Pub. They're not, like, obviously the existing corporations have lasted this long for a reason. Right. But I do know that there's what they do for business reasons isn't always what you want as a consumer, and so sometimes you got to support what you like.
Unless you go to Bane.
So speaking of, if you decided, like, we would not be opposed to those lunchboxes coming back, because I'm telling you, I had a really sweet G.I. Joe lunchbox. It was the coolest kid in elementary school.
Yeah. So I mean, like, we're always doing the trying to look at the mass media stuff of things, and like we've got things coming up that I can't talk about right now, but there are things coming. I mean, but it's still going to be an indie product. It's still going to be created and worked on by another indie company. It's still going to be something that's true to my vision and their vision. And it's not something that's going to be someone else's vision or saying that, so we can't have Spider-Man do this to this character because we got to sell 1 million lunchboxes this month.
Sadly, that probably happened, that conversation. Yeah. So last question before we get your how people can find you. What's your opinion on retconning?
So I think it works in some situations. So I'm actually speaking only as a person who really enjoys what's happening with the MCU, and I understand that you have to do that because when you're doing flashbacks to other things and you're building something like the way they did it with, especially with WandaVision, was it made those other movies more important because it went back and showed those scenes that weren't in the movie, that like, oh, so that's why that happened. And you're like, okay, so that makes, now I can go back and watch that movie, and it gives it new context. But when you're doing this, when you built something for 60 years and you have to continuously keep doing that, you need to tell a different story. They're like the Marvel comics, DC, it's not even just a retcon, it's the decimation of a universe and then restarting the universe all over again continuously. And then you get right back to where you were at before, and you have to do it over and over and over again, like the crises at DC. How many crises can they go through before you're like, we need to just tell new stories?
Fair enough. All right. So where can listeners and viewers find you on the wild interwebs?
Okay, so on Facebook, I am the Edge Comic. On Instagram, I'm at the Edge Comic. On Twitter, I am at Marvin Wynn, because someone has at the Edge Comic and they've never posted, and I want Twitter to give it to me, and they won't.
Ooh, that's rough. And all of those will be in the show notes. And you can find us, dear listener, on our website at anchor.fm/blasters tech and tech blades, anchor.fm/blasters tech and tech blades. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. You can reach us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. And you can support us over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley, and put in the comment section that is for the podcast. I promise I will keep our co-hosts duly intoxicated. They will drink until their liver surrenders. Or
never surrender.
If you want to support us on a more reoccurring basis, anchor.fm/blasters tech and tech blades offers you 3 venues that you could do that. Bring us home, Doc.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. For our very own Puff the Magic Dragon named Nick Garber, J.R. Handley, I'm Doc Cisca. This was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week where we indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, torturing J.R., and mocking the absentee Nick.